Have you ever had to do a book review and you were supposed to criticize the author, but you didn't really know how? Well, that's what we're going to deal with in this video. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Todd. I'm really excited to talk to you today about how to conduct a book review, almost like the general rules for criticizing an author's work. I think when we think about criticizing, we think of being critical, and what I really mean by that is being able to assess the strengths and weaknesses of a given work. Most of what I'll be sharing with you today really comes from a book that's a classic called How to Read a Book, and it helps you identify the rules, the parameters through which you can actually critique a work. Often students will submit an assignment to me on a book review, and it will consist mainly of almost things as ridiculous as, well, the font was nice, and that's not helpful. It's almost like when you're critiquing someone giving a speech, eye contact was great. That kind of stuff is not really helpful. So when you're critiquing a book, a few things that the authors of How to Read a Book talk about are things like this. Do not begin criticism until you have completed your outline. In other words, you've read the book, you've thought through it. You can't make judgments until you can literally say that you understand what you just read. Also, it's not very helpful to disagree with great contentiousness. This is not a polemic or a sermon. It's an analysis of the author's work. So let the facts, let the author's words speak for themselves. And so also make sure that you are able to articulate the difference in your personal opinion and the reasons for your judgments or what you're about to say. Now, once you kind of understand everything, the idea is to look at the book as a whole. And there's really, when you're looking at like strengths and weaknesses, there's only four answers you can come up with. I mean, that you can use. Either if you're going to agree with the author, you just simply agree, and you can say why, but you're done. He or she did it right. It's great. I agree. Obviously, when you're trying to, and by the way, don't submit something where you got to do strengths and weaknesses. If you really don't have any, I think it's better just to say you don't see any than to make something up that sounds kind of silly. He used too many semicolons, that kind of stuff. Just be focused on the big picture stuff. But so you can either agree, that's one option, but the other three is where a lot of the heart of what we're doing here comes into play. And you can say that the author is uninformed. Maybe there's some information he or she doesn't have that would have made a difference to their argument. I've been watching some older cop shows from the 60s, and one of the things that my wife and I discovered was, man, everybody smoked back then. And so at that time, research really hadn't been done to determine how unhealthy smoking was. So there was simply, they didn't have enough information. They were uninformed a lot of times. And so that would be an example of being uninformed. There's a critical piece of information that if the author knew this, it would change his or her argument completely, and they don't have it. And therefore, that's a shortcoming. That's a weakness. That's a problem in their overall presentation. The second may be that the author is misinformed. What if the author, in the situation we're using the metaphor of or the example of the smoking, what if the tobacco industry created false research or pseudo research and presented it in such a way that the person producing the work was following bad ideas or untruthful statements? That would be a question of being misinformed. So you can either be uninformed where you don't have a critical piece of information, or you can be misinformed where you're using a bad piece of information. Smoking is healthy for you. It promotes longevity of life, those kind of things. Well, that's a problem, and that would be a weakness. So they're either uninformed or they're misinformed. Now the third one, and this one's harder to find in published works that have gone through the normal publishing process or peer review process, but it can happen. And that's that the author, for some reason, is illogical in his or her reasoning. And sometimes they miss the boat. That their logic is flawed. Now you see that a lot of times, of course, in student papers where students are learning to write. But in general, that's one of the options that you have. So maybe they they're writing something about the smoking situation, and they make the connection between those who smoke have blonde hair. Well, those two things are non sequitur. They don't follow. It's illogical. It has nothing to do with anything. But that's the kind of thing you may see. And then the fourth thing that you may see. Now, the first one, you're obviously in disagreement. The fourth one's a little different, although it's sort of a disagreement because it's more of a wait and see. In that case, you may say that the author's analysis is incomplete. Maybe there is well-known research about the effects of smoking, but the author has simply not considered them yet. Not that he doesn't know them, but that he just chose not to include them, for instance. So that may be an example. We see this a lot when I'm doing things from a Christian counseling perspective. When you're critiquing a secular work, what you'll see is anything that is supernatural or spiritual is completely ignored in the secular work. And so from a Christian perspective, that would be a glaring weakness, of course, because we know that there is a God who is there. And and we know that there's a spiritual reality to this world. So that would be an example there. So the idea here overall is if you're going to disagree, you need to disagree within those parameters. The author's either uninformed, he's misinformed, he's illogical, or he's incomplete on what he's presented to you. And from that perspective, you can then make sound judgments in your own logical reasoning as to what those results would be. So one last thing about all this is make sure you elaborate and support your own reasoning. If you say the author is uninformed, now you don't have to use those exact words, but if you say that, give the reasons and cite from the text where this is a problem. Don't just say he's uninformed, move on to the next thing. Give your reasons why. Model what you're missing, what the author's missing in his or her work would be helpful. Well, I hope this has been helpful. If you enjoy these videos and would like to support the channel, make sure that you subscribe to it, hit that like button so you won't miss future videos. And if you have any thoughts on what's the hardest part of doing a kind of a book review or an overall book analysis or critique, put those in the comments section. I'd like to hear from your experience. God bless. Look forward to talking to you in the next video.